Hi and good morning, Common Sense America. We are back. I am Eden Hill. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. What a powerful week back in 2023. And I am so excited to bring back to our show Amanda Griffiths. She is a contributor and woman extraordinaire with Young Voices. And we have so much to talk about. And Amanda, I'm so glad to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Eden. I've been looking forward to talking with you and talking with your listeners for a long time. So this is definitely a New Year's gift for me.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. You know what? Let's get right to it. We saw last month a lot of different news media. I'll call them lamestream media. Then I'll also call, some of my favorite podcasters. Everybody's talking 2024. We haven't even been into this new year, new week for a hot second. And we know what is ahead. I wanted to kind of get your predictions of both sides of the aisle, and who do you think is going to start dropping their names in the hat? And then I'll tell you my favorite ticket and we'll go from there.
Sure. Eden, the midterms were so interesting because in the aftermath, we saw both major parties distance themselves or begin to distance themselves from their respective party leaders. You heard a lot of talk about how maybe President Biden was losing his touch. Maybe it was time for a younger, fresher face.
Yes.
At the same time, you heard a lot of people speaking about how the Republican Party really needs to step away from Donald Trump. And it was, for me, refreshing as someone who has ample criticisms, both of them. But it has been interesting to see in that aftermath who's emerged. One of the people who has, I think everyone knows, is Ron DeSantis, who, of course, kind of wrote in a bit, and this is going to perhaps sound unfair to him, on Trump's coattails. All I mean by that is to say he used Donald Trump in a lot of his early campaign ads, capitalized on some of those key endorsements when Donald Trump's political capital was quite high. At the same time, I see, as someone who is about to relocate from, but was recently living in California,
right?
I see Gavin Newsom trying to position himself as essentially the left-leaning foil to Ron DeSantis, especially on the culture war stuff. Anything that DeSantis does, maybe to troll the left a little bit, Newsom will do the opposite, the inverse in response. And I'm not sure whether that behooves him. I am excited because I think a lot of the media cycle has been focused on New York politics. Now they get to see what we've been hiding here in California. Those are my two big ones to watch for sure.
Let me ask you this. So America's governor, Ron DeSantis, has a new book coming out, and it's coming out the end of February. And it's very strategic that it comes out in and around President's Day. And I sat there and thought, from a strategic communications professional standpoint, oh, this was very smart. And what are your thoughts to him throwing his hat in the ring, and how early do you think? I mean, he keeps dancing around it, but how early do you think we're going to start seeing these contenders like America's governor, like Newsom, start saying, okay, enough is enough. We're going to go ahead and get right into this ring?
I think you're going to have to see it very early. I do, because now we essentially got a 4-year election cycle, whether that's for good or for ill. But the second you've got one person announcing, everyone else comes out of the woodwork. And the downside to that, of course, is that gives political opponents a lot of time for vetting.
Yes.
And it gives the political opponents a lot of time for oppo. The upside to that is that all the cards are on the table. It's just an endless campaign season for you. It's an endless fundraising season for you. And fundraising is going to be, especially small dollar fundraising, is going to be huge, I think, this cycle. In a lot of ways, because small dollars may be the only kind of thing that people can give.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. So we see the big name contenders, but do you think in your opinion, Trump was a bit premature in announcing end of last year and then coming out with his superhero card collection. His stratcoms does not make any sense to me. And I respect the man because he was my previous boss. But some of the moves that they are currently making from the homeland of Mar-a-Lago do not make sense to me.
I'm not sure what President Trump's legal team looks like. It doesn't seem to be giving him very good counsel. Stratcom, right, as you mentioned, is not strategic communications, not really. I'm not sure what people he has there. At the same time, I understand he wants to be the first to announce. I think a lot of this is his personality. I suppose I don't need to be as diplomatic as you do because he was not my former boss. But he doesn't really have that type of personality that will wait and bide his time until the absolute most strategic moment. So I'm not sure whether this was his decision, whether this was his people's decision, or whether he went around his people's decision. I see a lot of what he does as being sort of like that, that little boy in school who teases you and your parents tell you, just ignore him, he'll stop. And then he doesn't. And then your parents say, well, it's because he likes you. And I think the you in this case is the media.
Yeah.
And honestly, to be quite frank, I think the same can be said for the media vis-a-vis Donald Trump. You'll just ignore them. They'll go away. Well, if they don't go away, it's because they like you and they need you. They both need each other. So I don't think Donald Trump could have waited one more minute if he didn't have to.
Let me lead into this. I know we're going to be talking all things and really jazzing up this news cycle today, but let me talk to election integrity. I know you had written an article last month about election integrity in Real Clear. Was it Real Clear Politics? I believe
Real Clear Policy. Yes.
Okay. And we need to address the real barriers to election integrity. And you wrote this last month, but it is not going away. And, I sit here and say, I don't know if you knew I had run for elected office. And, I uncovered a lot of election integrity issues in the state of North Carolina. And, North Carolina is a battleground state when it comes to presidential. So my question to you is, for the moms, the dads, for the new voters for this coming year, going into a presidential election season, from the election integrity standpoint, and all of us sitting at our kitchen table discussions saying, okay, enough is enough. We're going to be hearing presidential for the next 12 months. We're going to be hearing all of this stuff. It's going to be exhausting nonstop. But what do you say to them and say, my vote doesn't matter? Does the election integrity issues across this nation trickling through all these different states, does my vote really matter? And to the layman out there, do I even bother listening to the media because they're going to tell me a lie anyway? There's all these questions out there for the truck drivers, for the mom and pop shops, for the small businesses. And, even for myself, who said, oh my gosh, it is literally in my face. Hence why this podcast was started, because there was so much lying and manipulation and money laundering in even a local district for a state house seat. You kind of sit there and say, well, so where is the election integrity going to be?
Sure. And Eden, I remember you talking about how you ran for office, and you did it right. You went door to door. I remember you're one of the few who still does, and you heard about the real issues, the issues that are being talked about around the kitchen table. And it's never good in a place like America, especially, to have people talking about election integrity and does their vote matter. Now, what I try to address is that the left and the right, broadly speaking, do highlight issues that come up around election integrity. The right has raised issues with the balloting in Arizona. Why does it take so long? In California, it takes ages, I think, because everyone just expects the Democrat to win. But in Arizona, it's a little bit more touch and go. They're still counting votes. When you have these glitches with voting machines, I understand. I'm terrible with technology, so I can't blame anyone. But these are the sorts of things these are the kinks that need to be worked out so that people do feel confident as
Right.
Americans going to the polls and having their voices heard. Similarly, wondering whether wondering whether you're going to be able to cast a ballot, right?
Right.
As the left often points out, it happens in certain districts. That's an issue too. But when we look at the data, when we look at whether these problems are
Mhm.
really contributing to a
Mhm.
difference in outcomes, neither one of them, whether you're talking about early voting or mail in voting, or you're
Mhm.
talking about changing these various laws, putting more ballot boxes, extending these have a minimal impact on party makeup of
Mhm.
the turnout.
Mhm.
What we need to be talking about is something that you just mentioned, which is the fact that people, the incumbents and the incumbent parties, will
Mhm.
try to bar smaller contenders and other
Yeah.
people from coming in and joining the fray. Now,
Right.
that is critical to pluralism, which last I checked was
Mhm.
critical to democracy, which is
Yes.
something that both Republicans and Democrats, I feel like I'm both siding, but it's
Oh,
true,
yeah. Yeah.
both Republicans and Democrats keep talking about defending, but they never define what they mean. I think it begins with pluralism. It begins with
Mhm.
adding voices to the public square. So
Mhm.
my article in Real Clear Policy talks about
Mhm.
various policy shifts that need to occur really on a lot of the state levels
Mhm.
to bring more minor party, some people
Mhm.
say third party candidates into the race. And
Mhm.
I'm not just talking about libertarians. I often get pegged as a libertarian. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about libertarians. I'm talking about people who are maybe, not quite, they're politically homeless a little bit, as I
Right.
feel.
Mhm.
People who
Yeah.
are even democratic socialists, people who are Green Party. When
Mhm.
you're labeling everyone as an independent to get on the
Mhm.
ballot,
Mhm.
well, that means something very different between Justin Amash, the independent, and
Yep.
Jill Stein, the independent, and Bernie Sanders, the independent. They're
And
not all
Kristen
the
Sinema.
same.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, there are so many issues that pertain to minor party access that
Mhm.
just are designed to keep a two-party system in play.
Mhm.
And minor parties play a critical role as a stress test
Mhm.
on democracy, as we recently saw in
Mhm.
Georgia.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, that whole situation in Georgia, I listened to a lot of people's commentary on it. At the end of the day, you can hear from both sides of the aisle. You can hear both candidates. I'm gonna be honest with you, neither one of them I thought were good enough to be an United States senator, similar to Fetterman. And, being elected in the state of Pennsylvania, where, I grew up in Pennsylvania politics. And yeah, it was nasty and I saw things happening, but oh my gosh. Okay, if we're going to label things, you see a man who unfortunately has major health issues and shows up in his like he just came from a football game.
Mm,
That's not going to roll United States Senate. And I go right back to listening and not just watching the commentary from Georgia. I didn't hear anything from either side that said that's going to be the next senator from Georgia.
mhm.
And, I think that's another issue. I want to bring something up to you. There's a couple things as we talk about election integrity, the party system. And somebody said a comment to me over the holidays and said, literally sat on my couch during the Christmas holiday and said, I'm from the great state of North Carolina and I was born and raised here. And this is an amazing state. And this state will always be red to me. And I said, whoa, okay. I love this person dearly. And I said, bring me to this understanding because the state is purple. And this person said to me, well, we have a Republican legislature. We have a Republican lieutenant governor. We have a Republican court system. I said, just because they have an R next to their name doesn't mean squat.
Mm.
And the same thing goes for Democrats. And that, going back to the whole election integrity piece, there's so many layers to it. There's so many things that I have seen being here in North Carolina and comparing apples to oranges. Yes, I grew up in Pennsylvania, but living here in North Carolina, the old boy party system is just as filthy as Pennsylvania, but in its own way. So, for the American people to say, you know what, I'm going to go cast my vote and I'm going to believe that it's going to go through. I have trouble digesting that. I really, really do. I have trouble digesting what happened to Trump in 2020. I saw it in front of me being here in this battleground state. I saw so much happening here. And so I guess my bigger question to you is, as we are educating the next generation, as I know you do, and I want to talk about that next, how can we, separate from, we want to believe that this system is legit, but what can I say to my next generation, to the kids that I mentor and the kids that you work with, that your vote still matters, and actually believe that?
Of course, people's vote still matters, and
Mhm.
it will matter more when people. I believe in voting. I
Mhm.
believe in voting because I believe it sends a message. If you vote for anyone, right,
Mhm.
that concentration of
Mhm.
voters is going to send a message. Again, so we had, just to give some people some background, we
Mhm.
had a runoff in Georgia for the Georgia State Senate race.
Mhm.
We had Warnock and we had Walker.
Mhm.
And then there was part of the reason, not the entire reason, but that there
Mhm.
was a runoff was that there was a minor party candidate,
Mhm.
uh, and he identified as a libertarian,
Mhm.
and he got about 2% of the vote, which is pretty high for
Mhm.
a minor party candidate.
Mhm.
Now, everyone came out in droves saying if he just had stayed home, if his voters had just stayed home, then my guy would have won.
Yeah, I've heard that story so many times.
And that's not a democratic choice.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
What happened was there were enough voters who said, as you did just now, neither of these guys really represent me. This guy might have more of a shot at representing me.
Mhm.
As I said earlier, minor party candidates are a stress test on major
Mhm.
parties. So, what
Mhm.
needs to happen in that postmortem for both Warnock and Walker
Mhm.
is to be able to say, all right, what spoke to these other voters, this
Mhm.
2%,
Mhm.
about this other figure? And what
Mhm.
can I do? And what
Mhm.
can I add to my platform with
Mhm.
regard to that?
Mhm.
And it takes a long time, but that's the message that gets sent. Then that's part of democracy. So your vote always matters, yes. Other things
Mhm.
matter too. Different types of advocacy matter.
Yes.
Teaching people,
Yes.
going door to door, political advocacy that doesn't have to do with seeking elected office and telling
Yeah.
other people how to run their lives.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I got a shirt on right. This is you
I
own
see that.
yourself. I just want to scream it from the rafters. We talk about independent voters. I want
Yes.
every voter to be independent.
Yeah.
Every voter owns themselves. And
Yes.
that goes way beyond the ballot box, Eden.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. You are, I hearing you describe that to my listeners, I'm so grateful that you are such an amazing orator. I can tell you're an educator. So let's talk education. I have so many different types of educators on this show. Those who were running for Board of Elections for state of Michigan, some of DeSantis's endorsements for school board, AG for Youngkin's team, all those types of people who are in the education space. And I want to talk about a news headline that hit last month, but it's going to be relevant. And I'm wondering if we're going to see this happen in other big name universities around the country. But Stanford put out this article in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal put it out, beholding the school's elimination of harmful language initiative, the Stanford Guide to Acceptable Words. So what I did was I clicked on the PDF and I looked at the acceptable words. Instead of addict, you consider using person with a substance use disorder. Instead of addicted, you say hooked or devoted. Instead of basket case, you say nervous. Instead of blind review, you say anonymous review. And, I saw the other headlines and they were, no more brown paper bag commentary, and like for lunch. And I'm sitting here thinking, what? None of this makes any sense to me. So I want to talk about this Stanford language PDF.
Mm,
Do you think with your, and I want you to give our audience the background of where you've been working and
sure.
where you're headed and some of the things that you came up against in the state of California. Stanford obviously is in California. Are we going to see, do you think we will see more of this in other institutions around the country? And I want to add this little tweak to it. American Military News put out yesterday that the Marine Corps is now having anybody who's enlisted or serves, they will no longer say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am.
Huh.
And if you see the path I'm going down here, I want to understand, are we going to be told, continue to be told as time goes on? Are you going to address me later as X? Am I going to address you as Y? You know, I'm like, really, let's bring it back to the common sense piece here. And you, as an educator, I want to talk about that role that you've had and what your decision was to continue going forward and seeing these things transcend into the culture wars, is what you describe. Go
Sure.
for it.
You brought up so much. First of all, with Stanford, you brought up a core example of just administrative bloat, right? This is what happens. This is what happens when you have this incestuous relationship. Forgive me, I'm sure I can't say that anymore at
No, you're
Stanford.
fine. You're fine.
You have this you have this incestuous relationship between the university system in this country, whether it's private or it's public,
Mhm,
and the government with funding. And so there's a certain amount of funding, and it gets apportioned to.
mhm,
This is something that when we start talking about the University of California system strike, it probably should be going to grad workers
mhm,
and postdocs and things like that. But
mhm,
instead, it's going to various officers, various boards, various task forces to hire more task forces.
mhm.
And this is the kind of product that they put out. Now, I am perhaps the worst person to talk about pronouns because, first of all, when someone calls me ma'am, it's always offensive to me because I feel old. But I let it go. Secondly, there's so many more important things. I don't
Yes,
care what anyone calls
yes,
me when I'm not even here, when
yes.
I leave the room. All right. Now, I understand there are various issues that come up around misgendering that are genuinely, for some people,
Mhm,
bring up a lot. And I'm sympathetic to that.
mhm,
But, in terms of, we spend so much time on this petty back and forth culture war stuff when what really matters is, okay, let's talk about this example of
mhm,
administrative bloat. Oh, what caused it? And
mhm,
what caused it is not having the agency, not universities not having the agency to say, we should be paying this department a little bit more. We should be increasing funding for this undergrad group. Maybe we need this resource, this
mhm,
facility at our school.
mhm.
And to that end, there are many grievances that I share with what we're going to get into next
Yeah.
with the University of California Student Union, which is currently staging, along with UAW, United Auto Workers, which helps with
Mhm,
bargaining for the
mhm,
UC Union. They're staging the largest strike. What's going down is the largest strike in higher ed history. Now, much of this, as far as I'm aware, and I am a political science PhD student, so a lot of my friends are very directly involved and
mhm,
that really at the bargaining table.
mhm,
I have a very nuanced view on union activity and on collective action. I think it has been useful in the past to get really critical change done. I think it's an interesting, communal, you know, communal event, and
mhm.
it's important. It's a way of expressing voice. And so I share a lot of the grievances about, TAs should be getting paid more, especially in California, especially in Los Angeles. Cost of living is
Awful,
higher.
awful.
Co- Cost of living is higher than what I have been getting paid as a TA.
Mhm,
And, you have to take out loans, and that indebts you to the government, and you go back and forth and back and forth. So I get it. One of the things, in retaliation for this refusal to bargain adequately in the union's eyes, oh, in retaliation, just about everyone I know has been withholding their labor as a teaching assistant, which at a large research university like UCLA
Mhm.
um, is really, that's the job that leads those discussions. That those are the people who are leading huge lectures, like
Mhm.
seminars on
Mhm.
Thursdays and Fridays.
Mhm.
That for me is one of the key reasons that I started higher ed, why I started on this journey, is because I love to learn from
Mhm.
students.
Mhm.
I love to develop relationships of true equity, right? Of back and forth,
Yes. Yes.
of mutual exchange, and to hold those seminars, to organize them. I get so
Yeah.
excited. I will have late night discussion sections, and I come back more invigorated than I've been all day because
I
of these
bet.
undergraduates. And maybe I'm selfish, but
Mm.
I didn't
No.
want to take that away from
Mhm.
myself or from them. And especially given the fact that, yes, there's so much that has been neglected in terms of grads and postdocs needs
Mhm.
from the administration, whether that's due to the administration or it's due to California
Mhm.
policy. And that is a whole other discussion.
Right.
But
Right.
there's so much. And yet at the same time, when I look at the brunt of the past 2 years with COVID policy in
Right.
California,
Right.
that has fallen on the undergrads who they don't get paid anything. And a lot of them are much more responsible than I am. They're supporting families. They're working multiple jobs. I have had office hour phone calls with some of my best students. And I mean, they're all my best students, but it was so engaged students, undergraduates who are younger than I am.
Yeah.
And they're on their phone in their car because they're picking their little daughter up from school because their
Right.
mom had to work an extra shift.
Right.
This is not an abnormal situation. This is how I'm able to talk with them, and we talk about their papers and we
Yep.
talk about their ideas, and that
Yep.
is so meaningful. It is these students who have been deprived of the opportunity to be in the classroom in California for the past 2 years. And I thought it was absolutely egregious. And again, no offense to my friends who worked very hard at that bargaining table. I thought it was egregious to even consider, for me personally, taking away even another quarter or 2 weeks
Mhm.
of true academic experience when for some of them this might have been the first full quarter that they were really on campus and making
Mm.
these critical relationships with professors. That falls to me as a teaching
Right.
assistant for a lecture level class.
Right.
So this, it's been rough to say the least, to be
Yes.
trying to look at both sides and kind of hold both there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, as you have gone through so much and you've seen so much, and I think for a lot of those who tune in, I don't think they can even wrap their brain around some of the things that you have personally firsthand experienced because of what COVID did during that time period and how it was handled by the state of California. If you want to put apples to oranges, you do the Newsom to the DeSantis, you got, freedom, and then you have and I've heard Newsom say many times, what is freedom? And but then I say, and I look at you, what you have done, what you continue to do, what you continue to do for your students, and just your compassion, your love of education, your love of teaching, and like you said, that equal equity between you and the students, it speaks volumes. And I wish, and I want to say this to my audience, and then also to the Young Voices crew, where you are that next generation of leadership to really instill true values of what it means to have an education, what it means to understand, what it means to really engage in the public square and know that your voice is going to be heard.
Yes, even so when I was an undergraduate, I
Mhm.
was studying acting and I was modeling also in Los Angeles, and I was having a lot of fun. And I was on the side for fun because you can't take the DC out of the girl, and I grew up in DC.
Exactly.
I was also in poli sci.
Yep.
And I had one professor toward the end of my undergrad tenure who really we developed a great academic relationship. And I went to his office hours the first time because for me, you only went to office hours when you were in trouble with someone. But we he engaged with me at my level, and he kind of, I won't say single-handedly, but he drew out this academic passion that
Mhm.
led me to the University of Chicago, where I got my MA.
Mhm.
And, my goal is not to be that person for other people, but
Right.
my goal is to be part of those relationships that
Mhm.
will change the court and to draw out what's already there and say,
Mhm.
this is really special. Let's see what we can work on here. Let's see what we can develop and mold. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all about figuring out, what is freedom to me? What does that look like to me? I think everyone has to answer that,
Mhm.
and helping people helping be part of the way that people answer that is so critical for teachers, for people who are tasked with this. You wipe away all the dross about, of course, how much you get paid to live is important,
Right.
of course. But so much of the rhetoric that just treats undergraduates as babies, as infants. I
Mhm.
am not a babysitter. I didn't
Right.
come here to be, and I don't feel like a babysitter when I step in that little discussion section
Mhm.
and I have students telling me and making jokes about, you know, More's Utopia and asking me questions about Machiavelli, who is my,
Mhm.
he's my
Yes.
political subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not babysitting. I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm learning.
Mhm.
And for me, that's so critical to keep front of mind.
Mhm.
And then you can take that advocacy piece and saying, I need to do this for my students. I need to have the means to do that for my students.
Mhm.
That's going to require this. That needs to be the approach, but not to just sideline the
Yes.
next generation of students,
Yes. I can.
despite the face of the administration.
Yeah, despite. Exactly. Exactly. Well, as we end this powerful segment, I want to throw in one final thing.
Sure.
And I would love for you to share with our audience, since we have such a huge audience that are fans of Young Voices, share with us your most recent achievements with Young Voices. I want to recognize you.
So I'm so excited. I have been for the past 6 months a contributor for
Mhm.
Young Voices. It's kind of a test run, a lot of professional development, a lot of publishing and being on shows such as your own. And then afterwards, there's the ability to apply for alumni tracks, which is reviewed on a 6 month basis. And I will be continuing to work with Young Voices. I'm so excited
Mm.
as a commentator and as a writer, and hopefully as a speaker as well, as
Mhm.
I move from slowly making my way hopefully back to Chicago and maybe DC a little bit. Right now I'm moving to UW Madison to follow
Yes.
my advisor, which I'm very excited about, a little bit nervous. And I was recently a nominee for their Contributor of the Year
Mm.
award, which was such an honor. And I don't really know how it happened, but everyone who was nominated was just everyone is just so fire, whether they were nominated or not, in terms of
Mhm.
the content they put out. So to be among this small group of people from whom I've learned over the past 6 months, part of my community now,
Yeah.
uh, was truly something. And so people always joke, "Oh, it's an honor just to be nominated." Well, it truly was, and so that was those are kind of my two big achievements, two big holiday gifts, I think, for me. And
Yeah.
I want to merit it. I want to come to deserve it in the following year. So
Oh, well, I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for Young Voices. I'm grateful for your beautiful heart and all that you do. So thank you. And many, many blessings to you this new year. Amanda Griffiths, contributor to Young Voices and a woman extraordinaire, as I call her, to all those at Young Voices. You guys know how much I adore you. So thank you so much. Happy New Year. We are in
Happy New Year.
2023 and we are taking on many great things. So many
Yes.
blessings to you. Thank you for joining today.
Blessings to you and your listeners, Eden, and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much.